Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. I'm your host, Webster Tarpley, reporting here from Washington, D.C., and as usual, a lot of material to report on and cover today. It looks like the Anglo-Americans think, and I stress think, they have a chance for a color revolution or CIA people power coup in Iran. A hysterical statement from Barkey this morning. We are excited to see robust debate in the Iranian election campaign, and Barkey is taking credit for everything in advance. My speech in Cairo, says Barkey, my speech in Cairo will be the cause if the regime in Iran can be overthrown. Let's see. We have statements from the Pastaran Revolutionary Guard who indicate that they are well aware of what's going to happen. So it'll be interesting to see if a color revolution or people power coup of the CIA, MI6, and related Western intelligence agencies is possible in Iran under these conditions. And we'll get to that in just a minute. But let's now shift into the struggle front, the domestic political struggle here in the United States around economics is our leading topic. And in particular, California. I had the opportunity to be in California last week. That was the reason we went with a classic best of World Crisis Radio broadcast. So when you go to California, you are visiting ground zero in the budget crisis that is now afflicting all the states. Interesting. Bush destroyed New Orleans and the Gulf Coast. Obama is destroying the entire Midwestern industrialized area, starting with Detroit and all of the subcontractors, and a place like California. Look, with Obama, it's destruction and devastation on a much vaster scale, mediated, of course, through Schwarzenegger and other tools of finance capital. So what do you do about California? And, of course, with a few small changes, you could apply this to any state. Needless to say, to go around talking about the free market gets you absolutely nowhere. To go around inveighing against big government makes you a tool and a stooge of the bankers who are cutting the budget because they don't want to pay. They want that money to go to the bonded debt. The bondholders have to get the money, they say, not the welfare victims or sick children. So what you need is a draft emergency action program for your state, in this case, California. Let's use California as a case study. What is it that you should demand? The basic principle of this is class consciousness. In other words, there are bankers and there are you. And these are the fundamental classes that are confronting each other. So the goal is to shift the cost of the world economic depression to those who created it. In other words, elementary justice. The bankers created the depression with their derivative speculation and other kinds of speculation and deindustrialization. It is therefore the costs that will be visited on them. So shift the cost of the current crisis off the backs of the people and off the poor and onto the parasitical banking interests, in particular the derivatives bankers and assorted zombie bankers. So what are your demands? First of all, number one, no layoffs of state employees. Restore and maintain vital services at all costs. You've got to maintain your electric grid, police, fire, highways, public health, education. Water deliveries to California farmers are a big deal, as well as water deliveries to communities. What has to be applied here is the Nuremberg precedents. The United States manufactured these, and therefore they should be respected, and they are, in many ways, a permanent achievement of world civilization, whatever the flaws that would be inherent in this. But today, let's treat them as a moral and a political standard. If you deprive a civilian population of food, clothing, shelter, and medical care, for whatever reason, you say, well, this is economics, so we don't want to default on our debt. That's a high crime against humanity. This was dealt notoriously dealt with very harshly at Nuremberg. And what you're looking at today, Schwarzenegger says that California is 50 days away from total collapse, which I think by what he means by that is default. Now, default is not the end of the world at the level of a state. A debt moratorium might be a good thing at the end of the day, but let's see how we can do other measures that might be more instructive. But certainly the notion of a debt moratorium, that is a permanent freeze on interest and principal payments on the California bonded debt, is a perfectly legitimate kind of option, and this has been done by various countries, by Brazil, by Argentina, as well as by many, many American states. After crazy old Andrew Jackson and Martin Van Buren, his right-hand man, destroyed the Bank of the United States, of course, you had the massive Panic of 1837, which bankrupted a whole bunch of states, including such leading ones as Michigan, Pennsylvania, New York. They seem to have survived. I'm sure California will too. Because remember, your wealth is not your credit rating. We've seen how ridiculously corrupt and stupid these credit rating agencies are. It's your trained workforce. So that's the other big provision. When you're dealing with the California budget crisis, don't do anything to destroy, undermine the health and well-being of your workforce, because that human capital, that mental capital, the trained workforce of California is the source of all wealth. As Abraham Lincoln once said, labor is independent of and prior to capital. The source of all capital is labor. That's right. The only way you get a locomotive or a machine tool or any other capital good is by having labor manufacture it. Now, the centerpiece of the program for California right now is we have the assorted parliamentary cretins in Sacramento, and they're talking about how they're going to cut off all welfare payments to welfare victims. They're going to cut education. They're going to do a series of suicidal, destructive acts of vandalism on a mass scale. The centerpiece is a Tobin tax, a securities transfer tax. Call it a sales tax for financiers and oligarchs. Of course, Tobin, James Tobin, the distinguished economics professor of Yale, I believe a Nobel Prize winner at one point, maybe not. Anyway, who cares about that? Who cares what a bunch of reactionary Swedes might think? It's the Tobin tax, a securities transfer tax on all derivatives and speculation. And people ask, well, you're calling for the wipeout of derivatives. Certainly, derivatives wipeout is the goal. This can, however, be done at the federal level. What a state can do is tax derivatives, and this is in some ways even more instructive. In California, as a result of recent measures, the sales tax paid by the average person is approaching 9% in most parts of the state, in the neighborhood of 9%. This is a regressive tax. This is the kind of tax you do not want. Of course, a poll tax, a flat fee, is even worse. But 9% on purchases of shoes, clothing, things like this, household goods, that's outrageous. So that's what the people pay. Now, when we turn to the San Francisco banking district and we see places like Wells Fargo and related banks, what do they pay, pray tell, on their derivatives, stocks, bonds, foreign exchange currency, commodity speculation as they drive up the price of oil and gas? They pay nothing, zero. There is a huge stream of wealth, of securities, of derivatives above all, which is not taxed at all. We simply say, let the bankers pay their fair share, 1% Tobin tax, securities transfer tax, on all financial turnover paid by the broker. Back in a minute.